We are here indeed.
So, my name's Michael Vaccaro, and I'm a mindfulness-based counselor and men's coach. And today I'm talking to Dr. Keith Motes, who is at the minute all the way over in Louisiana. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah.
Cool. So it's pretty fun that we're having this conversation at such great distance.
Across the world.
Yeah, man. Um, and I also want to just sort of take a minute to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land where I am, which is Bundjalung Country. And do you know much about or in touch with much Louisiana, where you are right now, and the traditional custodians?
Well, I know that the traditional custodians are the Native American Indians, and there's a few tribes that are kind of based in the southeastern United States. Um, and my grandmother is actually half Native American Indian, so I have a
Okay.
bit of that blood flowing through me, which is pretty cool. And
Wow.
funny enough, I connected more with my Native American Indian heritage when I was in Australia.
Okay.
It's pretty funny how that works out.
Do you have any theories on why that is?
Oh, I think multiple things from just I, I opened up spiritually more like kind of when I arrived in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
More spiritually so. Whereas before that, I was also really young and more focused on school and university and sports and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of American lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a
Yeah,
dual citizenship to Australia. So
I do.
how much time have you spent here, and when were you here?
So I lived my first about 20 years of life, 20 maybe one in the US, and then from about 22 or 23 to 33, no, 32, almost 33, mostly in Australia. A bit of traveling within all of that. But a significant portion of my life has been in Australia, and yes, I'm a dual citizen now. I got that through my work in quantum physics. I was able to get a Australian citizenship with that. Hmm.
Pretty amazing. Two great countries to have citizenship to.
Hmm.
Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah.
And so uh, you mentioned that you did your PhD in quantum physics. Is that right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I did it. That's why I went to Australia to begin with.
Mm.
I finished my undergraduate degree in Louisiana at Louisiana State University, and I had an amazing mentor who was a world famous quantum physicist. He's passed away now, unfortunately,
Mm.
but he was my first physics advisor and just one of my most powerful advisors in life in general, it turned out. Um,
Mm.
and he got me connected to a group over there in the ARC Center of Excellence for Engineered Quantum Systems, which is a big internationally and governmentally sponsored quantum physics program that's all through Australia. And I got in a program there, full scholarship. And the idea of just moving to across the world to Sydney to experience a whole new life and get paid to do it and to do a PhD program was just it just sold me straight away. Yeah,
That's a lot of grace, brother.
I was like, yes, let's do this.
Yeah,
I'm
sure. Why
down.
not?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. And so that's it seems like, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like a polar opposite world to embodiment.
Yeah, I would say in general it is. Most people in academia are not that embodied in my experience, and
Mhm.
usually pretty out of shape. They're very non-athletic, like the traditional kind of nerdy, geeky sort of stereotype, if you will. It's very prevalent in that world. Now there are exceptions, like I feel I'm an exception. I've always been highly quite athletic, and there are others, but it's few and far between to find like I'd say maybe an embodied person in that world.
Mhm.
Mm.
So, what led you to want to do that more cerebral quantum physics? Where did that come from? Is that sort of, was your family more into academia?
A combination of a few things I've kind of figured out over the years. Firstly, growing up, as a kid, one of my favorite things I'd say to watch on television were things like the Discovery Channel, and I think it was actually quite good back then. Like they had legit programs on there with like cool science
Mm-hmm.
and not saying they don't have any now, but I feel like a lot of it isn't like that anymore. But anyway, it's just I was always fascinated by watching like the space programs, like all about the universe, watching about things about evolution, like the dinosaurs, all this sort of stuff fascinated me. And then in school, in high school and middle school, I actually didn't really care that much about school. It was more I really loved to do the sports and the social aspects, but the academic part, I was just like I could don't I could care less. Like the main reason I made good grades was because if I didn't, my dad would ground me and I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. So that's kind of what motivated me in some ways. But nonetheless, it was pretty. I found it pretty easy. Like it could be a result of the school I'm in or whatever, but I found it pretty easy to make mostly A's in most of my classes and without trying too hard. And I was big into like various sports like soccer, cross country, track mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with Nick Smith, my track coach and cross country coach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I guess of course girls and video games, stuff like that I was kind of into. And then I was going to, so I graduated high school and then I was, American, doing the American thing. The next step is what? It's go to university, go to college. In Australia, they call it uni. Here, they usually call it college in the States. And so I was just going to go. And at first, my initial plan was just to keep doing what I've been doing. And so the idea was just to pick something easy, just to get through it and have the experience of college and get a degree, right, and get a job. But I just kind of well, to be completely honest, I had my first magic mushroom trip after I graduated high school, and it was during that trip that I remember very vividly gazing at the stars and just in awe, like at the wonder of the universe. So I always felt this was a big part of it, and it was that night during that trip that I decided what I was going to study in school, and that was physics. Because in high school it was my favorite science class, which is funny because everyone in my school hated the physics teacher, but somehow I still really resonated with it and did really well and really loved learning about that sort of field of study.
Can
And
I
then just during that mushroom trip, it became clear to me that that's what I should do. Before that, I had never thought that that's what I should do, and so I did it, and I something changed that I actually did it focused on the academia and really started loving it and diving in and just like I couldn't get enough of it. I just loved doing my homework and just doing good at college and yeah, and still stayed pretty social and also stayed on top of my sporting, like athleticism. Like I kept running all the time and even playing on soccer teams throughout college. Dating, like I still had a very well-rounded life within all of that. And so, yeah, that's what drove me. And then once I finished that, the next step in physics, you don't really do anything with it except for go do a PhD in it. And I knew when I chose it that that's not the kind of field you choose to get a good job. And I didn't care because I did it because I wasn't doing it for the future for a job. I was doing it because in that moment, that's what I wanted to learn about, and that's what I just trusted that everything would align and flow. And yeah, so
Did
that's a
you
bit of it.
did you have
Yeah.
like a leaning towards or influence spiritually before this mushroom experience that you mentioned?
Honestly, I think that was my first kind of spiritual experience ever. Before I was very much like not against. Actually, I could probably fairly say I was against religion. I was like, I would consider myself an atheist. I grew up in the deep south, which is like the Bible Belt, some people call it. And so religion had a deep influence on the culture I grew up in, and I could see at least what I focused on, what I could see the most was all the negative aspects of that, of how so many people, at least to me, seemed quite conditioned in it and made all these crazy like lifestyle decisions and choices based on essentially what I felt was fear um, brought into their mindset from these religions. And so I just saw right through it. At least that's what I felt, and I still kind of feel that today. But that kind of opened me up a bit into the spiritual realm. I'd say that it more so opened me up to the wonders of just like appreciation of life itself and the universe for the first time. And that I never really thought about it before this moment, but I guess that was probably my first spiritual experience. And probably a bit later, near the time I graduated, was the first time I tried yoga. Yeah, and I really felt a spiritual experience from that. That's when I've always thought that, oh wow, I had like that's when my spiritual awakening kind of began.
Mm.
It's just like my first yoga class really kind of just started connecting the realms of all the athletic embodiment I've done through my life to connecting that with like breath conscious awareness and just that simple, it seems simple, but I guess it isn't necessarily simple, but it just flipped this switch in me that was like whoa, and it changed me. um I'd say that was like when I really started shifting spiritually,
So
was after I got into yoga. Yeah.
how old were you when you started doing yoga?
Oh, I was probably 21. Hmm.
Yeah, it's probably a similar time about when I started practicing yoga as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something about it. If you hadn't done anything similar and you didn't know anything about those traditions and those practices, because it's so deeply pervasive on all levels, there is something about it where you just feel like you're more, and I guess this is the whole purpose, but you feel like you're more in touch with who you really are than anything else you've come across in your life so far. Whether you would,
Mm.
I don't know if I would have defined it that way when I started yoga, but it's looking back on it now, it's like you're getting in touch with levels of being, levels of feeling, levels of knowing that you hadn't before. So it's like the volume
Mm.
gets turned up on awareness and maybe down on busyness, anxiety.
Mm. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Mm.
and I saw in your bio there that you also have an interest in Taoism and Tantra, and where does that all come into it?
Well, so yeah, so I was doing, once I got into yoga, I got into it pretty big. I'd say I started doing it just about every day, and that continued on from when I graduated in my undergraduate. And then I moved to Australia to do my PhD, and I immediately like joined the gym, and there was yoga classes on it. I was going pretty much every day, sometimes twice a day. And the teacher, I remember his name was Yogi. Actually, he's an Indian guy named Yogi teaching yoga. Amazing dude. And I just kept doing yoga, kept doing it, loved it. Um, Eventually, there, after a few years, and during my teacher training in it as well, so during my PhD, I did a yoga teacher training. Um, but eventually, I felt like, not knowing why, but I felt my yoga practice kind of plateauing. Like I wasn't seeing the kind of gains, if you will, that the first couple years really brought. I imagine a lot of people experience this, but
Is that just
yeah,
because of the contrast where you came from to what it's like to start doing something you've never done before versus already having had the practice and then just slowly moving forward? There would be a different contrast in your early years of practicing.
yeah, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. When you do anything new, usually the shifts are more dramatic at the beginning and then plateau off a bit. So it's definitely a bit of that.
It's more novel, I guess, at the start as well.
Yeah, so, and part of that, I didn't stop doing yoga because of that, but I was like, what's going on? I wonder, maybe I started thinking, oh, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's a missing link or something that could help, that shift, that kind of, to get that next sort of like big boost that I felt, I started feeling like I needed something different. And so this is when I started getting into more Taoism and Qigong sort of practices, more subtle energy sort of practices and movements, and rotate more softer rotations and articulatory sort of movements versus yoga. At least there's many types of yogas, but the yoga I was doing was mostly lots of vinyasa and some yin, and so it's very strong. It was more about making the physical body strong and flexible, while bringing in aspects of breath awareness and pranayama. But the qigong just like it just added something to the practice that I felt the westernized yoga classes that I were doing, the teachers were all missing. And I understand it's hard because to bring that in, because people might not resonate, they might not be ready for it, so they might not resonate with it, and you might get less people coming to your classes or whatever. But for me, it's kind of the sort of thing I started needing, so I started getting into that a little bit more, as well as doing more, just less asana and more meditation and breathwork practices as well. I'd say that kind of started coming in more and more in line with the qigong practice. But then shortly after I found qigong, I also started finding therapeutic tremoring, which is, I'd say, really what took me to the next exponential increase of kind of growth, all rounded, from the physical to the energetic to the emotional and
Was that
spiritual.
was that taught to you? Did a qigong teacher say, "Hey, let's practice some tremoring now"?
No, it was not taught to me. My first ever experience with it was in a deep sort of meditative state, and I was in a sort of like trance-like state, and my body just something spoke to me. It said relax and surrender, and I did, and my body just it started letting go of all the control that was my whole life had been about. It feels like our culture is all about, really. And instead of being frightened and fearful of it, which a lot of people would be, something in me just said that, let it happen, allow it, surrender. And so I did. And oh boy, did it move through me. It moved through me for hours, and I just let it. And I was tremoring, and my voice was opening up to sounds that I never heard, just because my body's relaxing. My body started going into stretches that it would and never would have done before, and stretching more than normal. It was fantastic experience. I had no idea what was going on. No yoga teacher, no qigong teacher ever mentioned this ever. I never heard about it or read about it in a book. I just was like, something funky's going on here, but it feels good, and I'm gonna let it happen. And I did. And eventually went to sleep, woke up the next morning just with a big smile on my face. I felt awed and like a sense of like being reborn. And yeah, it was a phenomenal experience that changed my life forever.
I remember you telling me this story when we first met um, uh, at Eli's men's um, honoring of him. And I was so,
That was beautiful.
yeah, that was lovely. And hearing your story and meeting you, because I think we kind of went straight in. It was like, oh, hi, how you going? And then within like 5 minutes, you're telling me this story. And I was just like, it's so incredible because I had had an experience that was similar, but not to the same extent. And it was nice to see at that point, I didn't know anything about your work and what you do. I just thought, oh, one of Eli's friends. And and then so hearing that was such a confirmation for me as well at some of
Mm.
the spontaneous experiences like that. And what's interesting is that I would kind of date my first experience of that back to what, maybe 2012. But since then, with um, going into mindfulness with people, therapy, and even in coaching, if they're willing to go into that space, I find that myself or the other person will spontaneously come into a state of this tremoring that you're talking about. And so, what I often see is that if it happens spontaneously, and I don't say to someone, "We're going to do some tremoring now," that there can be some fear there. Could you speak to that a little bit? Was there an element of fear there in your experience of surrender, or was it all just ecstatic?
Um, it was there was both, but the fear wasn't from me. It was from the people around me. They didn't know what was going on. Actually I was in my bedroom, and there was a party going on in my house, and people, including my girlfriend at the time, like they saw that something was happening, and they didn't know what it was either, and I didn't know what it was, and I just let it happen. I was like, this is like I was feeling like this was the best experience I was ever having in my life. Others were scared to death, like they thought I was, one way to view it is like, oh, he's having an exorcism. This would be like how the Roman Catholic Church might put it. Um, we need to, they're possessed by the devil. This is some of the
Mm,
taboo that's been
mm,
around this. What I now know that science calls therapeutic tremoring, or sometimes
mm,
neurogenic therapeutic tremoring.
mm,
This is, yeah, so there was fear around from the people around me who were trying to, I don't even know what they were trying to do, but necessarily, but they were like trying to calm me down. Or one
trying to
lady was
fix you.
this, yeah, one lady was this like 20 years plus doing yoga lady, and she was like trying to like cleanse my chakras like with her hands, and I'm just like trimming. Like another friend had a like a 2,000-year-old Tibetan singing bowl, and he started playing it on my heart, it was just, it all complemented what was happening very well. But if I felt like some of them were a bit like, whoa, what the heck's going on? Like there's a bit of fear.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but to speak to that more, I was actually having a call with someone yesterday. Won't say any names, but it was this exact question. She had a bit of an awakening with it not so long ago. She's been a Qigong teacher for a decade or so, and um, she had suddenly, just I think it was like a month or so, or a couple months ago, she had tremors starting to move through, and like me, and probably like many people, when spontaneous movements start to arise like this, she had never heard of it or experienced it. So she saw my ad on Facebook or something, and she's like, "Whoa, maybe this is actually a thing." And so she scheduled a call with me and was like, her first question, she got straight into it, was like, um, is this normal? Is something I should be scared of? Like the Qigong masters all seem to be terrified and they're like avoid this stuff. And the funny thing is it actually is in the Taoist kind of yoga system of Neidan. And it's the stage that, at least in some of those traditions, comes after Qigong, and you can think of it as spontaneous Qigong. And similarly in the yoga system, they might call it spontaneous Kundalini, which is kind of like Kundalini is that kind of life force energy. They say it wakens from the root of your spine and it just floods you with all this like really powerful life force energy. There's so many ways to think about it, but
Is it the same thing though? So would you say you were having a Kundalini awakening experience, or that it's are they related? What would you say?
I'd say they're highly related. Kundalini is, I believe there's like yin and yang aspects to it. So or in other words, like we can harness it enough to where we can control it to do certain things, but we can also let go of control and allow it to do what it needs to do more subconsciously or instinctively in our bodies for healing. It's kind of like, we don't think about our heart to beat, it just beats. If we have, say, trauma in our system, this our body's intelligence, if we get our logical conditioned thinking mind out of the way, it can actually go into and unravel these sorts of things and do it safely and very effectively and naturally. And that's part of this. And to me, Kundalini is just, it's a very yogic concept. A lot of people don't really like the concept of Kundalini. Some yogis usually love it, but it's like, I don't want I don't want to say like I'm a master at Kundalini or anything, but from my perspective, it's related in the sense that um, therapeutic tremoring, it tunes into this intelligence within us that will move energy through us and move us the way we need to move to unravel the tensions in our body, the stresses and anxieties, and even really intense things like trauma and PTSD that
Mm.
can store within us. And I think that's very related to Kundalini life force energy. And in some ways, I'd say they're kind of different ways to describe a very similar thing. Not to say, that not to any way put down any culture's perspective, because I actually value all these perspectives, and I don't really see that any one of them's the ultimate truth in any way, but they're kind of like pieces of the puzzle.
It's beautiful
And
poetry
yeah.
about other people's life experiences. When you read a textbook or hear a teaching or someone hears your experience, you're poetically in some way expressing your personal experience. And so, although it's been put down in textbooks in different traditions around the world, you have your experience, which means that your poetry about it is valid and useful
Mm,
to share your part of the story, the collective story.
thank you. Yeah, totally. I think that's important for us to do, and those who are having experiences with this, that in some ways to feel someone express that in words that can't really be spoken because it's like an experience that you can artfully, describe it in so many words, but it's never the same as experiencing it yourself. But yeah, to feel someone's in their presence and who've had certain experiences like this is really powerful and can in some cases be enough to awaken that in others, Yeah.
So you mentioned safety before, and so something that comes up where you talked about fear. I think when something's unfamiliar, like the more unfamiliar it is, the more potential for it to evoke fear in someone. And again, like yourself, I have people coming to me, I'm experiencing this thing, this energy coming up my spine, or I'm experiencing spontaneous vocalization, spontaneous movements, spontaneous mudras, like all kinds of things like this. And if you haven't come from having a lot of experience with this and it's really unfamiliar and the fear's there, what do we say to people about, one, sort of normalizing it, and two, if they have questions about what can I do to help, how can I, what are the safety concerns around this, and even how do I find a way to still go to work, drive a car, because it can also be quite, I put a lot in that question. But you kind of see what I'm getting at here, that, how do I live with this if I don't even know what it is?
Okay, well, I'd say it is, from my experience, a very safe thing to explore because one, it's evolved in all of us for hundreds of millions of years as a mechanism to let go of trauma. There's um, videos on our website and such. You can see animals in nature. They experience a traumatic event, and then as soon as they're safe, they tremor for a while, and then they just go back to their normal lives as they're nothing's ever happened. Like I'm sure they remember the experience and they learn from it, but in their body, they're not being held back with like trauma being stored in their body. So just thinking about it in that way, I feel can be helpful because it's an evolutionary design that's just been instilled within our nervous system for naturally and really quite easily letting go of some of this stuff. And I say easily because once you get it, a lot of people get it after one class. Most people, after a handful of classes, they have it for the rest of their lives. It's not, you're not really learning anything new here. You're just remembering something already
Mm.
there that probably as a young kid you did until your parents or other people started suppressing it. These kind of spontaneous movements or shaking under the table or whatever it might be. And so fear-wise, I totally get that doing new things can be scary, and you know, and that's also, I guess, a evolutionary trait in a way to keep us safe. But I guess I never try to push it on anyone. I'm not like, hey, you have to try this. It'll change your life, and it probably would. I really believe because we're all mammals, we're all animals, that 99.9% of people on this planet could benefit from tuning into their therapeutic tremoring mechanism. But I'll never try to shove it down someone's throat. It's like when you're ready for it, it's there for you. If you're open to it, you really have to, because it is so different. It's been made taboo for thousands of years since, like the Roman Catholic Church and such. It's so ingrained in especially our modern West culture, to be thought of as weird, as even devilish, satanic, as being, possessed, or just like you've lost, like you have some disorder. And in some cases, that's true. There are disorders associated with involuntary shaking, which may not be therapeutic. And my theory is, in some cases, it probably is therapeutic. It's the body trying to come back into homeostasis. Of course, it would take some pretty big scientific studies to prove that, which I don't currently have the resources to play out. But that's my hypothesis
Mhm.
anyway, and that at least some of these mainstream disorders are it's actually the body trying to come into homeostasis, but instead they medicate it, or they try to purposely stop it because they think it's weird or bad or whatever. And so it's never going to do its thing to see. But that's also very minority. Most people don't have these disorders, right? Most people, pretty much everyone has stress and anxiety to some degree, even if it's minor. So the majority of people could benefit, and I've worked with thousands now with this, and I've seen like pretty much no negative results. I could say no, like there's been some intense traumas being released, which can be a bit of a handful, but as it's panned out, it's always been really beautiful integration process, and overall very beneficial. Yeah,
Would
and
you?
so many. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say, would you say that our capacity to, like, if we're showing up, um, one, interested, or two, even spontaneously starting to tremor, would you say that that's a sign that you're ready? It wouldn't be
Yeah,
happening unless you felt safe enough, and ready enough to release whatever it is that's been held in your system.
I'd say it's a good sign that your body's ready for it. But it's you don't. I don't. I wouldn't say you need that to do it because. Uh, well, I can put it this way: a lot of people are very subtly, and you become more sensitive to this as you develop a therapeutic tremoring relationship with yourself. But a lot of people are already subtly trimming, even if it's super minutely, but they wouldn't even be aware of it because for whatever reason. But you can, as you clear your mind body complex and the stress and tension and the trauma with this and other work too. I'm not saying this is the only thing to do, but it's just a focus I've had. Um, but as you fine tune this beautiful instrument of the human body we have, we become more sensitive. And I'd say it's very common for me to be in public and just I can feel people tremoring on the inside, and I
Mm.
know that might not make much sense to a lot of people, but it's just like, in other words, you can feel the tension that they're just holding on to. And because it's like when you work with a particular medicine, you become more aware of when you come in contact with someone who could benefit from it, because you could feel that tension that you've released in your body in them more easily.
Mm.
So it's kind of like that.
So this is kind of
Yeah,
like getting a bit more mystical on the conversation. And so would you say that, and that's cool. So would you say that there's not only that you're more attuned to if somebody else has you could almost say like a contrast. If you've let go of a lot of tension, it's more obvious when someone else hasn't, because it's in contrast. And
totally.
we
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that limbic, like, mirror neurons, and we have so much going on where we're feeling empathically what's going on for the other people, whether we're aware of it or not. Would you say it also consequently, gives permission for the other person and make it more likely for them to tremor if the person with them is holding less tension?
That's a great way to. I really like the way you just put it. That's a great, absolutely fantastic way to put it. And Yeah, I'd say holding, if I got your question right, holding space for someone, having embodied this, it can make it a lot easier for them to tremor. Did I understand that
Yeah.
question? Yeah, so it's like not, I mean, I want to put it in another culture's perspective. The Kalahari Bushman, which is one of my favorite cultures to study around Shaker medicine because they've been doing it for 60,000 plus years with no really interruptions. So they're considered the world's oldest culture of therapeutic tremoring, and it's still present today, and it has been for at least 60,000 years, probably a lot longer. Um, and their whole I don't want to like they're an indigenous culture, right? It's hard to say I don't want to say they have systems and stuff because they don't. They are it. They pass it on from generation to generation. They don't write textbooks about it or
It's
anything.
embodied.
It's just embodied and passed down through probably not even really words, but probably more feeling and touch and just observing each other. But their whole culture of shamanism revolves around how embodied they are with this tremor mechanism. And the really you might say the really advanced shamans can simply just touch someone and they can start convulsing in tremors. Not necessarily they will. There needs to be like a receptivity and openness in the receiver to do so. It's not like they can just like point at you and you just start convulsing. It's not like that. It's like if
Well,
like someone's ready to be touched, if that shaman touches them, they call it passing on the shake through the touch, the intention and such.
I can kind of relate to that, like having had different experiences with different spiritual teachers. Like, for example, one of my most sort of strongest spontaneous tremor release happened just sort of sitting with a spiritual teacher. And then another example might be so, are you aware of Amma, the hugging saint? Um, she sees millions of people, and if I go near her or around her, I will often have like spontaneous movement or tremor happen, and yet other people might come along and just think that was an awkward experience. I won't do that again. And so there's a and I wouldn't blame them for thinking that because it is a very unusual social situation. However, um, it's just speaking to what you said before about that there is something about the combination of two people together being willing to go there that creates that.
100%. Yeah, it's like I do work sometimes where I work with individuals and through touch. It's not super often actually. I don't advertise myself for that or anything. It just kind of happens in the moment sometimes. But I've had experiences, very strong experiences, where I've passed the shake on through touch, and it's powerful for them. It's powerful for me too, because I'm still like, even though I've been doing this for years, I'm still like growing in this and learning more through this practice of embodying it and sharing it and through touch. Usually it works best, I find, if they already have a therapeutic trimming practice because they know how to allow it, so to speak. But there has been a case where the person never even heard about it, didn't talk about what I do at all, but then uh, just through some body work, she just started full on trimming, and I was just like a bit, yeah, she never done it before, she never heard about it. Um, I don't believe she knew that I did that. Like we recently met, and
Oh wow.
so it is possible, but usually in most cases, they have a practice of their own. Like usually they've done at least a shake hand medicine practice or something,
Mm.
a class, and my real intention with this isn't to, at least so far with what I do, it isn't to like hold someone's hand through this process, and it's more to like help people, help awaken it and help them remember so they can be empowered and do their own healing. Like I don't want necessarily people to rely on me to do this. So my intention has always mostly been to share this, to educate people on this and empower them with this practice to be able to do it on their own. And I'm happy to support that, as much as I need. But in the end, in the long term, my goal is for them to just get it and be able to take it on their own journey and utilize it whenever they need. That's kind of been my intention with it. Yeah.
It's incredible. It's almost like sort of midwifing a very natural process for people rather than being the one that, does it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be that. That's not my goal. But I am so happy to facilitate and hold space, um, which is what I've been doing, and help awaken it. And then I'm always like, okay, you know, you've grown your legs or whatever, go out, you can do this now. You got it. Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about uh, you said neurogenic tremoring, therapeutic tremoring. We've been talking about it for a little while now. Could we, and we probably could have done it a little bit earlier, but could you just maybe like highlight or elucidate a little bit what the actual process is, what's actually happening, what is it?
Yeah. So what is it? There's so much to the what is it. It's kind of like it's like we spoke about earlier, the mushroom experience. You can talk about it all you want. You'll never understand it unless you try it. It's kind of like that. But nonetheless, it can be really fun and playful to do our best and artfully try to describe it. I'll, so let's do that. So the therapeutic tremor. So the process. I'll start with the kind of the process of how I like to tune into it in my classes and workshops and such, I suppose. Basically, we wouldn't just jump straight into it because this therapeutic treatment really works on the more, I like to say, the electrics of the body, like the nervous system level. And so we really don't want to get to that until we are grounded, right? And even before maybe we're grounded, we might do some physical warm-ups. Like so basic flow would be warm up the physical body. And there's no one way to do that, right? We could go for a jog, we could do some yoga asana, you know, work out at the gym. Like usually I'll use some yoga because I'm also a yoga teacher. And then and then I like to do some more energetics grounding and centering, like with some qigong exercises. So getting into that more subtle body, and those tools really I feel help us center and ground and tune in to our breath and such. And then I will usually go into some voluntary shaking as part of that too, because that's like one side of it's not the same as tremoring, but it's in a way it's kind of close. It's a great warm up for tremoring, and
So
it's
that's,
even a qigong exercise.
yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say that's something that is more ingrained into the forms that we know of. It's more common practice that you might hear someone at a class say, "Okay, now shake it out," or something like that, and it's this
Yeah,
voluntary, like just sort of trying to loosen up the physical body.
yeah. So voluntary shaking's become quite normal in even yoga these days, and especially qigong practices, and probably tai chi too. Um, and but it's not quite the same as therapeutic tremoring, but it's a great warm up, and it's great for our health regardless. Like, I always recommend, if nothing else, go do 5 minutes of voluntary shaking a day. It'll probably change your life. It's super
Absolutely.
beneficial to just do that. But it helps loosen everything up, get everything flowing. And then from there, and that'll be like the warm up, all that's kind of the warm up in a way to the therapeutic tremoring, which is usually of, the focus of a shaking medicine class. And and now that we're kind of grounded and centered and we can regulate ourselves a bit, we're warmed up, then it's safer to now start going into the therapeutic tremoring, which I'll usually do by there's actually so many ways to tune into it, especially as you cultivate a relationship with it. But yeah, starting to move in subtle ways, subtle, slow, relaxed movements, and such in different shapes in the body. And usually through practicing actually relaxing as much as we can within whatever it is we're doing, we can then feel one way to think of it is tuning into the tension in the body and then allowing that tension it starts to dissipate, like something spontaneous starts to happen. And it's often like at first like a one-off like jolt, quake, shake, and then it stops and it's like, oh, what was that? And it's like, okay, then move through that, maybe even slower, more mindfully until you can get it to perhaps be a little more sustainable. And then once you kind of get it going, the process is hanging out with it then and just letting it start to move you. And that's a very simplified explanation of what I would go into in a class,
Mm,
of how to kind of different ways to tune into it, through embodiment practice really.
mm,
And so what is that's starting to turn on that tremoring? It's like the somatic instinctive intelligence within our body is starting to turn on this so-called tremor mechanism. And there's different ways to think about it, but one of the ways I like to explain is that these charges store in our body. And these charges, I use that in a very broad way to include things anywhere from like stress, anxiety, aches, pains, um, perhaps like inflammation, suppressed emotions, trauma, PTSD, like all these sorts of things. This is like a sort of tension that can store in the body in very different ways. And I like to just call it like charges in the body, like unintegrated, unprocessed charges. And once we start getting our nervous system tuning into the tremoring, it kind of guides the body in a way that actually usually feels really pleasant, really beautiful to tune into these charges and these tensions and such. And then once it tunes in, it starts dissipating it through the vibration of the shaking. And generally, the more we can relax our logical thinking mind, the more we can, the more this can play out, and our body can move us to heal these things stored in our body. So hopefully that helps a little bit around that.
absolutely. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful, it's really lovely to hear you talk about it and pull all that apart, because it gives an understanding around something that is hard to understand for a lot of people. Um, and I was just thinking of everyday experiences that people could relate to, particularly if you don't commonly talk about things like energy or some of the other things that we've been mentioning today. But I could say, for example, in my daughter, I have a 4-year-old girl, and I always lay with her till she falls asleep, and often as soon as she's fallen asleep, she'll start doing this a little bit before she fully relaxes. And then within myself, I might notice, like, so that common experience, like, I just got a shiver up my spine. That's probably something that everyone can say. And it's just like all of a
Yeah,
sudden your body just kind of, and so
it's
that's
contagious. Eh?
right. If I even just saying that to you, you felt like kind of moving a little bit, right? So I just wanted to kind of bring it to something really normal and familiar as well, because that's kind of where we started our conversation, that it's supernatural, not supernatural, it's very natural.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's do that. Well, I'd like to say what I want to do, bring it back to the normal. I usually bring it back to more scientific
Cool.
terms of speaking, and I like all these different cultures and how they describe it. So I'm open to using it all. But to bring it back to like everyday, I guess, our culture and stuff, like, well, first of all, I'd like to say there's tremors we often get while falling asleep. That has a scientific name. That's called hypnagogic tremors. And essentially what's happening, and it's so related to what we're doing here at Shaking Medicine, it's essentially what's happening is perhaps for the first day in your or for the first time in your day, as you're falling asleep, you're deeply relaxing, right? So the way tremors arise, at least these therapeutic tremors, the main way we explore them is by relaxing the body. So when you relax deeply enough, the tension in the body has nowhere to go but to dissipate itself, if it makes sense. And that term for that's hypnagogic tremoring, and a lot of people get it when they sleep. Actually, when they fall asleep, it's quite normal. And if you embody it, you'll probably get it more, even more so, because you're more receptive to it. Um, yeah, so we could say that as we tremor, um, we're down regulating the nervous system. We're moving from fight and flight states of our nervous system to rest and digest. So sympathetic to parasympathetic, which is basically moving us more into homeostasis or in equilibrium. And that's essentially what's going on. And as we do that, there's so many functions within our human system, right, that function optimally in rest and digest states. So, like our digestion, right? To name one, deep breathing is easier when we're in rest and digest. If we're in fight or flight, it's usually short, shallow breathing so we can run from the tiger or whatever. What else? There would be our immune system would function better. Um, just, yeah, so much. Our heartbeat would probably slow down. What I guess things like all of our organs would just function a little more
Is that
in
the
a healing way.
I was
Yeah,
going to say, does it also help regulate hormone function and things like that?
yeah. So anything that um, is basically any of our organs or functions that operate to, say, heal us or to digest food or regulate our hormones, they work when we're in rest and digest. That's the simplest way to think about it.
Yeah.
If we're not in rest and digest, if we're in fight and flight, all that stuff essentially gets turned off. The blood gets pumped to our extremities so we can run or climb a tree or whatever. If you're thinking back when we lived in the wild, more so especially. But this is essentially what happens. So if you want to be healthy, I'd say most of the time you ought to be in rest and digest sort of modes. Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
hormone regulation as well.
Yeah. So I think like the way I normally say that is like homeostasis. So the most important thing is homeostasis unless there's a threat. And I think what happens in the lifestyle that we have now is that we just feel that we're in some version of threat more regularly. So are you saying that when we do you have to be in a state of rest and digest to elicit the tremor response?
Well, it's a fine balance because from what my perspective, I think most people in our culture are at least in a constant state of fight or flight, at least in a mild way, maybe not an extreme way necessarily, but I feel most people out there aren't fully down regulating their nervous system to a deeply relaxed state every day, or most probably aren't at all. They're just, it's like you said, most people are in some state of stress due to, and we're not, no one's in mortal danger really, right? It's all because of the pressures of our culture, or school, or work, family, deadlines, da da da, And it doesn't have to be that way at all, but
Mm.
it is. And but yeah, so it's a balance, right? You always have to work with where you are, so we can't just say, "Oh, you're stressed, you can't do this." Like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's like okay, if this is, say you're here, whatever that is, a bit stressed out, and maybe, and the thing is, most people wouldn't don't even know probably that they're stressed out almost constantly because that's just normal for them, right? And probably the people around them are at a similar level of stress. So everyone's vibing off of each other
It's
up
familiar.
here instead of like really relaxed down here.
Mm.
Um, at least this is one of my perspectives around it. And but let's say someone's say somewhere around here. If I can get them to just start relaxing a little bit, that's enough to get the tremors going, and then that will slowly vibrate them down and down and down. And then, I'm not saying one session is going to get you from here down to here
Mm.
permanently. It's like it's a process, but next time you might start off here. It just might stay with you, and then next time a little bit more and a little bit more. And then before you know it, you're just in tune with your system. You've built a relationship. You're more embodied, which is kind of also the way this conversation started a little bit with
Mm.
embodiment. As you become more sensitive and resilient within your nervous system, it starts to get to a point I find where it's like if your stress bar or anxiety bar or whatever it is starts rising, you become acutely aware of it quickly, and you're like, oh, I need to downregulate, and you just go do it. Like you don't even have to think about it that much.
That's similar to what we said before. So, like when I said feeling the contrast between your state and someone else's state, the more down regulated you become, the easier you can feel the contrast within yourself when you start to move out into that fight or flight.
Mm, totally. Yeah, it's just like that for sure. And you can feel that contrast within yourself now as well as others, which is pretty cool. And then you also might become more aware of like when someone's more sensitive than you are, more attuned or whatever you want to call it. You'd be like, oh, well, maybe that person can teach me a thing or two. Like, you might miss less of these opportunities in that way as well. Like in other words, you're more present in, if you're not thinking all the time. If you're more present, you miss out on less opportunities, perhaps, and
And present on
just
a level of feeling.
mm,
Mm.
totally. And I love that it brings us into feeling. That's actually something I like to say a lot. Is we need to move out of thinking and move into feeling, and by doing that,
Mm.
we can that really helps to start to turn on this tremor mechanism within us. And then it's all a big feedback loop. Once you turn it on, it's like it relaxes you more, and then you can move into deeper tremors to your body. Oh, it's actually nothing to be scared of.
Mm.
You can let go of traumas and all kinds of stuff, and it's usually a blissful experience. Like even if you're crying, it's like, oh, I'm crying, there's tears rolling down my eyes, but this feels so good. And you might be wailing and crying, but inside you're like, I'm letting this stuff go, and it's, it feels good, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was my intuitive experience on those occasions where I had big, sort of spontaneous releases, was that because it's so viscerally obvious that the tension is worse than the release, it's like it can be this experience of gratitude of like, like, thank you. Like, this is exactly what I need. I thought I needed this and this and this. I just needed to let go. Um, and I also had the
Oh, yeah.
experience of like going into deep sleep afterwards of just like, like that's better. And I've never felt this relaxed in my whole life. Like, what is this? I didn't even know this was a thing.
I love that you say that. Ah, yeah. It's a common thing I get as well from people who experience this is they often, I've heard it so many times, they've never felt more relaxed in their life. And it's simple that it's your, at least one of your instinctive, powerful mechanisms for doing that. It's like, and I understand our culture's made it taboo and stuff, but I feel for kind of their selfish reasons, not for our good, so to speak. Mm. But yeah,
Another thing I was thinking about what you said was it sounded like the way you were describing it, there was something about the movement from more sympathetic to more parasympathetic. It's almost like it doesn't matter where on the continuum, but if there's a movement from more fight or flight to less to some degree, that's the access to tremoring, no matter what the degree and no
in a
matter
way,
where on the
yeah,
scale.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if you're really stressed out and anxious and nervous. If you can just if you can just initiate that shaking a little bit, it'll help move you down. It'll help down regulate and you don't need to be, you don't need to be like anyone else. It's just like the trimming moves everyone in their own unique way. I've never seen anyone trimmer exactly the same way, and that's the beauty of it. It's like we all have a very unique set of life experiences with unique stresses and traumas and such in our life that we're all definitely going to need a different way of trimming to release it. But the beauty is we don't need to know what that is because our subconscious mind or our instinctive mind, however you want to think about it, it it just knows what to do if we can get our logical head mind out of the way, which is probably largely what caused us to get in this situation in the first place. It's overthinking and stuff like that.
And those thoughts that we're aware of, like the constant dialogue in our head, it's like 2% of what's going on in consciousness. So even though it feels, because we're used to putting the focus right there on the dialogue, it feels like that's my safe zone. But because it is such a small percentage of our experience and what's happening outside of our conscious awareness, if you're moving more into trusting the system or trusting life, it's good to know that you're actually going into trusting the majority of what's going on. It's actually the minority of what's going on is that dialogue,
Mm,
that self-referential dialogue in your
so
mind.
true.
And in
Yeah.
with mindfulness, you see the part of your mind that's in the brain, the network within your brain called the default mode network is like the seat of the ego, all self-referential thought, um, my past, my future, what's going to happen to me, who am I, and that they've seen that the size of that, the density of that, is in relation to how the person's mental health is going. So the
Hmm.
more time you spend in self-referential thought, the more time, the more likely there will be mental health stresses and concerns and diagnosis and things like that. So I just wanted to like really bolster your point and kind of encourage people that it's really worth exploring, trusting your system more beyond the intellect.
Hmm.
So I thought there's a couple of things. I'm going to put some videos in the comments, like because you have some amazing videos that are freely available online of what the tremoring process looks like. And you can just kind of get a bit more detail of how it physically looks and how to do it online. So I'll put links to that in the comments below. And also to your offering, which is shaking medicine. If somebody was interested in actually learning shaking medicine, or if they're at a point where they know about it, but they want to become a teacher or a facilitator, what do you actually have available for people if they go to that website?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So first of all, check out shakingmedicine.com. That's shaking, SHAKING, medicine.com. And that's where always I'll update with the latest events and stuff I have, which it's always growing and evolving over the years. So um, that's a great place to start. Some events that I do, first of all, there's a free class you can get right there on the homepage, shakingmedicine.com. So that's always a good place to start. I just refilmed it not too long ago, so it's nice and fresh. And I like to do that because I'm always evolving with this. It's growing. I get more experiences. I learn more. It's never staying the same. There's no, just like there's not one way to trimmer for everyone, there's not one way to share this with others. So it's always evolving. Check that out. Free class. I do embodiment courses live online there. I do teacher trainings live online as well. And you'll see there's tabs for each of those on the website with more information and videos. On the contact tab or the teacher training tab, you can schedule a call with me if you ever want to connect and ask questions, or if you're interested in a teacher training and want to learn more or anything like that, feel free. Other teachers I've trained are constantly doing various embodiment courses as well, and events. So it's getting out there. It's growing. Just this past week, I've just had amazing feedbacks and teachers saying they want to make this their career path, and physiotherapists wanting to go from doing psychotherapy to psychosomatic therapy by incorporating shaking medicine into what they do. And just it's phenomenal what's happening. I'm about to go to Europe to teach a festival for a friend's festival that I met him while I was in Australia, and he wants to do a Guinness World Record size shaking medicine class. So he's going to host it. I want to possibly be in the Guinness Book of World Records. Not that I care that much about it, it's just kind of flared into my life.
Sounds like fun.
But I'll be able to share this with a lot of people through that, and that's what I'm really excited about. And
Absolutely.
anyway, there's so much happening. Check it out, shakingmedicine.com, and let me know if you have questions about anything. Contact me, let me know.
So, one of the things that I heard you say just then was that this is such a profound way to support other modalities. So, you could be a yoga teacher, you could be a psychotherapist, you could be, you know, like any number of therapeutic modalities there, that if you were to have knowledge on this at either a beginner's or a facilitator's level, it would really support. As I said myself, in my own therapy work, I see it coming up, because what happens is if you touch into a certain sort of experience within someone, it's possible that it will just spontaneously come up. So it can be helpful to know about it, how it works, and the types of things that we've spoken about today. The other thing, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, was do you have a subscription thing where you can just get access to a bunch of content? Is that right?
Oh yes, thanks. There's an online classes tab there too at the website with 50 plus classes I've recorded over the years. So
Right.
they're roughly in order from beginner to more advanced, and you don't have to go exactly in order, but roughly speaking, and there's different teachers as theirs. So if you get tired of me, there's other teachers running classes too. So it's always good to get that diversity, I feel.
That's amazing.
And I thanks for pointing out the complementary nature of various therapies, and that's very important. If you don't mind, I might just talk
Go
about
for it.
that for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can, like I just mentioned a few through psychotherapy. People are using it in their singing. Singers are using it in their vocal coaching and their own singing to help awaken their voice to a deeper level and to like spontaneous vocal activation. Like amazing things can happen there. Yoga, qigong, athletes are using it to quicken recovery times. Trauma, PTSD veterans, businesses like corporations can use it to help improve productivity because if people aren't as stressed or in trauma, they'll tend to work more efficiently. The list goes on and on. We have different we have people working with kids with it.
Even as a
Just
parent, being able to hold less tension around my parenting is a massive step up.
so true. Imagine if, yeah, parenting without being in trauma, or at least not as much trauma or stress or whatever
And your
you like to
children
call it.
feel it
But
because they might not be
totally.
holding as much. So, like we talked about before, with the empathically feeling where someone else is at, if you're someone that holds a lot of tension and this fresh being comes into the world that's not hasn't had a lot of tension to hold, they're going to be feeling that in you and potentially even learning it.
Well, that's so true. I feel like there's a thing called like generational trauma or parental
Mm,
trauma,
mm,
and we have a, in a way, I feel we have a duty to our children to cleanse ourselves of this stuff so we don't pass it because they're just little receptive vessels. They're just going to absorb everything about you, all of your trauma. They're just going to take it on, like, or at least a lot of it, probably. So,
absolutely.
great point.
Mm,
So, another thing to mention is a lot of people come to me saying the first time they've ever experienced tremoring was on plant medicines,
mm,
and you definitely don't need plant medicines to do tremoring, and you don't need tremoring to do plant medicines. Again, it's something that can complement each other. I'll leave it up to the individual to self-empower their own choices on how they want to navigate all that, but it is a common thing that in that world of people doing plant medicines, whatever it is, ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, things, that tremoring arises. Interestingly, I'd say about probably less than 5% of the time will people tremor on plant medicines if they've never done tremoring before, but probably 95% of the time people who've done tremoring will tremor during plant medicine journeys.
mm,
So it's like there's definitely something to educating ourselves about it and actually trying it out. And most people say they just love combine the ones who do journey in the realm of plant medicines. When they do it, all they want to do is therapeutically tremor, or at least a big portion of their journey.
mm.
And that's because like it can just relax a lot the mind and body, and
Yeah.
it can be complementary.
Well, in those
So anyway,
in plant medicine journeys, like you're coming face to face with where you hold the most resistance and tension, and it's like, here it is, deal with it. So if you have a way to process that physically, it integrates the experience a lot deeper and less likely to have um, a fearful or harmful experience.
that's so well said. Yeah, it can, yeah. Another way to say that I feel is it can help those journeys be a lot safer because it gives
Yeah.
that energy somewhere to go instead of tensing in fear and being like, oh my God, when's it gonna be over? It's like, actually, I know they're tremoring. I'm gonna let it tremor. My laptop's vibrating. But yeah,
Even your laptop's empathetically tremoring with you.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we might wrap it up there. And I just want to say thank you so much. I love that you
Oh,
agreed to talking to me and such an awesome conversation.
gosh, it really was. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me, Michael. It's
Mm,
been like an absolute joy chatting about all of this. Yeah.
beautiful. Alrighty. Well, maybe another time we can have another conversation on a slightly different angle on all of this.
I'm open to that for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, have fun snowboarding over there.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this month's episode of Presence, Healing and Purpose, conversations that inspire positive change in your life. If you found this interesting and enjoyable, feel free to subscribe, like, share it with your friends. And also, I just want to let you know that this is one of 4 offerings that I send out for free on a monthly basis in my newsletter, The Monthly Value. If you'd like to receive that, go ahead to the description and you'll see a little subscribe link to The Monthly Value. We'll see you next time.